The cost of living in the UK is rising, and it's changing people's lives.
As the cost of living rises, so does pressure on the Bank of England to keep raising interest rates.
And I must say that I recognise the hardship this will cause for many people in the UK.
The worst is yet to come. The Bank of England believes the squeeze on our living standards will be so severe that it's forecasting a recession.
We are living through an economic crisis, a crisis that has been building for decades. Since the year 2000, global GDP has tripled, yet we are facing rampant inflation, a widening wealth gap, and a dramatic slowdown in the global economy. Misguided economic policies has seen the government borrow ever-increasing amounts of money. And these levers of growth have driven up the cost of living, pushing families to the brink.
Bye-bye, Bedford. That's been closed for a year and a half. You could see that being empty for years. It's just changed so much.
I am proud of where I'm from, and I've seen up close the impact that this crisis is having on families and local businesses. And I wanted to find out how much people understand about inflation. So I started here in my hometown of Bedford. My name is Peter McCormack, and this is Follow the Money, Inflation, the Hidden Tax.
And so this is where I grew up in Bedford. I spent my whole childhood here. This shop, this was called M&W. I worked here as a kid. So when I was 16, I got my first job. I got about £2.70 an hour. It's very easy to move away from your hometown and go and live in a big city, but I quite like being in my hometown, and this is where my friends are. And I like wandering around and seeing people I know and seeing how they're doing.
Over the last 5 years, I've been travelling the world, trying to understand the nature of money, but I always return to my hometown of Bedford, a small market town about an hour north of London. I grew up here, I raised my kids here, and I'll probably always live here. I love this place, so it hits harder when I see local families struggling and businesses closing.
Look, you just go and hang out with cats and have a coffee. I think there's a bar store where you could get all your bathroom stuff. That's gone. And also, look in there, even the charity outlet's not survived. And then you got Debenhams over there. You could see that being empty for years. I don't even know what this was. That's closed down. That's closed down. That big B&M, that's they used to be a Marks and Spencer's. That's closed down. They've moved one to the edge of town. And this is the main high street. What have we seen? 5, 6 maybe places that are closed down?
In 2019, I went to Venezuela to make a film, and I saw up close the devastation that high inflation brings to a country.
Another one. This used to be a great cafe. It's depressing, isn't it?
Inflation in the UK is now at its highest level for 40 years. With soaring energy prices, interest rates rising, and a looming recession, towns like Bedford face a difficult winter ahead. I want to know if people really understand the problem, because if we fail to fix the root cause, we will burden future generations with the costs of our mistakes.
Would you like to be in the film?
No.
We're making a film. Are you busy?
I am, yeah.
I'm just wondering, are you being affected by inflation at the moment?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm just coming off of maternity leave.
Wow.
So I don't have any money. I literally have to buy the basics just to make sure that we have enough food and water and everything.
And do you know why inflation happens?
Probably not enough.
Inflation is a complicated subject, and the government will tell you what it is, but not why it benefits them. When the government can't meet its obligations, they know that raising taxes is politically unpopular, but borrowing money from an endless pot is easy. While this leads to price distortion, inflation, and financial instability, there is a time lag.
How you doing, mate? Proper family business.
It is family business. Yeah. 7 years this month.
Louis, how long have you been in Bedford now?
Since I was born.
How long have you been here at Lingers?
20 years.
How long have you had the ice cream business?
On my own, about 12 years.
We're doing a film about inflation. What's been the impact on your products?
Well, prices have gone up in the last 2 to 3 months.
Raw materials at the factories are much higher, so those costs are passed on to us.
The main thing that has gone up is the salmon. That's $24.95 a kilo.
What was it 3 months ago?
20.
Beef went up about 20%.
The bass and brie, they've doubled in price.
Chicken's gone up 25 to 30%.
Our overheads has probably gone up 50%.
Are you absorbing any of the costs?
Some of it.
We're absorbing a lot of it. So we're not making as much on it as what we should.
We can't raise our prices because customers don't have the money.
And what's the impact that's had on you?
More stress. That pressure, I've had to absorb it. So you just hope that each day's a good day.
Do you know much about inflation? Do you know what it is? Do you know why it happens?
Gas and electric is the big thing, isn't it?
Petrol prices have gone up. Everything else seems to shoot up with it. And this year, of course, we've got the war in Ukraine.
Do you think the government is responsible in any way for inflation?
I wouldn't say responsible. No, I wouldn't say responsible.
Do you know anything about what the government does that may cause inflation?
They're not doing a lot on it, really.
The government borrows money constantly, and so the government then puts in place expenses for them to recoup it.
The country's going more and more into debt, and it's making a lot of people like me go into debt as well.
The pandemic hasn't helped the money that was being spent.
We went through COVID, and unfortunately now we are going to have to pick up the pieces.
Do you think it's fair?
No, but what can you do?
All right, what's good? What am I getting? I'll have 2. What's the best fish here? Anyway, Max, great to meet you. Good luck with
Take
everything.
care,
Hope it's
thank you.
okay for you, yeah?
Yeah.
Like many towns up and down the country, Bedford is full of hard-working people who are the lifeblood of the economy. But the economic crisis is hitting their pockets hard.
You're a plumber, right? You're a painter, and you're a decorator. Have you seen any impact from inflation in terms of the work you're doing?
No, because I is old. Therefore, I have a choice and am allowed to say no. But if I was in Liam's position, you said yes to everything because mortgage, children at home, don't have any of that now.
So how's it affecting you then?
Paint's gone up, which means customers are then looking at your price thinking it's going up a bit, then you'll have to put your prices up because your bills are going up.
How much has the paint gone up?
Off the top of my head, some pieces 3 to 5%.
What's even worse, if you've given the wife the quote, she'll say, don't worry, I'll get my husband to do it. And thanks very much.
And he'll fuck it up.
That's still another job you're not getting.
What about you on the plumbing side? Are you seeing it on materials?
Put up 5% one month, 8% another month, and it's just a bloody nightmare, really. But what do you do about it? There's nothing you can do.
And how about on a personal level, like outside of work? Is inflation affecting you at home?
My missus, every single week, she buys much the same things. The last 6 months has probably gone up 50 quid. And we're not getting anything different than we were buying 12 months ago.
Are you guys thinking about what's going to happen this winter? Because they're talking about the prices also going up.
Yes, fuel is now over £2 a litre. How can they justify that? I've heard tales already where the elderly, they live in their front room. That's no way for someone to live.
Do any of you guys actually know why we get inflation?
Well, it's got to be something to do with the national debt, isn't it?
You tell me?
They handed too much money out over COVID for a start.
In what way?
There was businesses getting money which shouldn't have had money, and the national debt is just astronomical now.
Well, the national debt is bigger now than it was at the end of World War II. How on earth we're ever going to pay this debt back, I don't know.
For you and I to take out a loan, we must have assets. If we can't pay back that loan, then those assets will be taken away. The rules are different for the government. UK debt is currently over £2.3 trillion and near doubling in the last decade. Not only is there no plan to pay it back, the government is borrowing even more. So what is inflation? Inflation is a general increase in prices. The government uses something known as the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, where they measure the increase in a particular basket of goods to calculate inflation. But inflation is personal, and the CPI can never truly capture the price increases that affect you. There are many factors that can cause inflation, but what the government will never tell you is that they also drive up inflation by increasing the money supply. This increase in the money supply happens when the government borrows money from the central bank to pay for the things they don't have the budget for. This is known as deficit spending. But there is another factor that drives inflation: credit. Credit is when people borrow money, and this puts more money into the system. More money in the system pushes up the price of assets. This creates winners and losers, because access to credit is not universal. It is mainly available to those with wealth already. Increasing the money supply has disastrous consequences, as the newly created wealth concentrates itself in the hands of fewer and fewer, widening the wealth gap and hurting those on the lowest incomes the most. This is not the first time that poor policy has crashed the economy. The financial crisis of 2008 was caused by irresponsible lending and poor regulation. Millions of people around the world lost their jobs and homes, and the global economy was pushed to the brink of collapse.
How long has Marcello's existed?
About 25 years. We had Milton Keynes up until 2008, and then sadly the recession got us. And then we moved here February 3 years ago.
So a moment ago when I said to you we're making a film about inflation, you got a big smirk on your face.
Yeah, the price of the cheese that we use, the mozzarella, gone up £25 in the past 3 months.
What about your other materials?
Everything from tomato sauce, flour has almost tripled.
So when you see that inflation's at 9% from the government,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, to us it feels more like 12.
So you basically absorbing a lot of the price increase?
It's hard. We've got a lot of loyal customers,
Yeah.
a lot of people that come to us, so they're feeling it as well. We're a family business, it's just us. My sister's here, my dad's here, my cousin's here, my mum's on her way. There's only so much we can do.
Seems stressful.
A recession in 2008, it literally destroyed us. I'm just petrified it's going to happen again.
So if I told you that inflation is caused by government debt, so the government essentially prints money out of thin air, and as they do that, it puts money into the system, and that money in the system is what causes inflation, how does that make you feel?
I've got absolutely no faith in the government, if I'm honest, like zero.
Why did you not bother with a restaurant?
After you lose one, you don't really want to go through that again, to be honest.
How rough was that experience?
I can't talk about it.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I won't bring up the World Cup. I'll really set you off.
They all think the government are full of shit. They will vote, and they know they'll vote people are lying, and they know they'll bullshit you and you get the same again. So it's that kind of like, there's nothing you can do, but we'll vote for someone and just go through the same cycle of bullshit again. And it's like, how do you break that cycle with politics? The political system is clearly now broken. And maybe it's something that's always existed, but we're more exposed to it now because we have social media and people are talking about it. The average UK family has a disposable income of around £176 a month, but a fifth of families are now living with negative disposable income. Inflation of any amount impacts the poorest in society the worst, as they have the hardest time absorbing price increases. I remember not long ago, it was like 80, 90 quid.
What's a quid?
Quid is a pound, man. Come on. British lingo for you.
This road is called the A421, and it connects the M1 to the A1, which are the two kind of main spines of road across the country. And what's happened is Bedford has become a centre for logistics, because if you've got deliveries north or south, you've got access to both major roads. So here we go, look, see all these here? They've all been built over the last year or so. I'm never going to be negative about jobs being created, but like, where's the aspiration? Where's the opportunity? Because I don't think they're good jobs. I'm pretty sure that you're on a clock to take a piss. That's an Amazon one. Yeah, these Amazon things are everywhere, and I can't square whether I think it's good or bad. Obviously, Amazon's created loads of jobs, and I use Amazon, so I'm a hypocrite. But at the same time, I can't help but wonder what the cost has been, how much has been lost by smaller businesses in local communities. That's one big fucking building. I wonder if Amazon is Bedford's biggest employer now. I feel like if they could replace the humans that work in there with robots, then they could deliver by drone, they would. That's like going into a prison.
I spent a bit of time in my hometown, Bedford, and now it's just coming into Harlow. It's one of the 20 most deprived towns in the country. Areas like this have been underinvested in. There's no real industry apart from working in logistics places. There's such a need for housing for people on the lower end of the economy that they're taking old office blocks and converting them into shitty little one-room apartments. My assumption is that it's paid for by the government. So a private entity will run it, because the government has to house people. In researching this film, I became aware of a housing project which to me perfectly highlighted the growing wealth divide. Harlow is a town north of London and is one of the most deprived towns in the UK. It suffers from a lack of affordable housing and has begun to convert disused office blocks into social accommodation, something the BBC referred to as human warehouse housing. These tower blocks have been used to house families and single mothers, but are plagued with issues of violence, sexual assault and drug abuse.
There it is. It's kind of sad, really. Look, you see like toiletries and stuff up in the window. It's just fucking grim. Are you from Harlow?
I am, yeah. But it used to be right. It used to be quite a thriving town. But over the last few years, everything's just sort of like closed down.
I've lived here all my life and this has been a good town to me. Society has changed. We've got people living in what was old office blocks.
Yeah, the Terminus building.
Not just there, there's thousands of dwellings. London is being turned into a no-go area now. Normal people cannot afford to live in London. People are being pushed out because the prices are cheaper in the Harlow.
It's going downhill. You look around, it just looks dirty and run down and...
I lost my job. I was working in a pub just doing maintenance and I had to close the pub and then I was out of work. You know?
So where are you living now?
I have a room, a shared house, and I have a room.
Here in Harlow?
Yeah, just not too far, 10 minutes walk.
I understand why people are coming here and I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is companies like Ceridian making millions and millions on the back of people's misery.
It's not just us, the whole thing with Europe and all this, Ukraine, and Russia and China. I think the whole world is just going to hell in a handcart. And all I see is all the politicians, no one's trying to put the fire out, they will throw more logs on. Hey!
Yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. Thank you, appreciate the time, yeah.
No problem.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you later. Bye.
While families struggle, there are people trying to help, but these two are now being stretched to breaking point with the massive increase in people seeking help. This year, the demand for food banks alone has increased over 100%, with some now running dry.
So could you explain to me the range of people that you've had coming through to seek help from you guys?
It ranges from people who are literally living on the street to people who are in full-time work, but they can't make ends meet because their pay is not enough.
It's a new phenomenon for people who want to work and can't make ends meet, and I don't think this story's been told enough.
More and more people are in debt to make ends meet. Inadequate housing, inadequate pay, all of that contributes to it.
Can you talk to me about the transition of jobs? More people now working in factories and logistics. What's the problem with those types of jobs?
Well, they're low paid and they're less secure, so the state is having to subsidise their income. I think globalisation has got something to do with it, because a lot of things that were manufactured in Harlow, it's presumably cheaper to manufacture them elsewhere.
And are you feeling the inflationary pressure?
Now, unemployment is incredibly low. A high proportion of people are poor because they can't make ends meet from their wage. The overwhelming number of people, something's happened in their life, bereavement, divorce, ill health, which exacerbates problems and then tips it over. The economic system ultimately is not working. It's failing to the extent that it creates a lot of these problems that we see. So government has a massive role to play. I don't pretend to understand the printing of money and the quantitative easing.
So do you think there's a restructuring required for benefits?
Over the years, it's been restructured so many times, always with the aim of trying to simplify it. It never quite works out. I love this job, don't get me wrong, but I'd much rather not be doing this because it is a sign of failure.
But where is that failure? What has failed?
That's quite a big question, isn't it? But
the failure is in the workings of the political and economic system. Economies should go through natural periods of expansion and contraction. But through irresponsible policy, successive governments have stopped allowing the contractions to happen, building a house of cards which is now collapsing.
How rapidly is the picture changing? Each week you see a lot more people arriving here?
We started this about probably 6 or 8 weeks ago. We've now got about 750 people registered for it. We're feeding about 100 families per day. So 500 families a week we're giving food support to. If you went back 2 years, it was about 60, 70 families a week. We're helping them basically cut the cost of their weekly shop so they can get through the cost of living. We've got a finance advisor there actually. We'll meet people and give them advice on their finances, because things aren't going to get better, they're only going to get worse for at least the next 6 months to 12 months.
I'm trying to demonstrate how this is affecting different people. A lot of media focuses on the poorest in society, but we've become aware that this cost of living crisis is now affecting working families. What's your experience with that here?
The local hospital has referred quite a lot of people to us because of the amount of people who are working in the NHS on very minimal wages.
So you've got nurses and such coming. Wow.
In Harlow, a lot of low-income working families are on benefits. Something like 40% have some kind of benefit, but that's not the same as being unemployed.
I think that would surprise people, that family that is bringing home 60,000 a year is in crisis.
They're in crisis because of the nature of modern living. We are coaxed into expending a certain fixed percentage of our monthly income on outgoings that sustain and maintain our lifestyle. There is a whole mindset about how we can now afford that slightly bigger card because things are all right. My credit cards are huge right now, and I'm just a normal guy, you know. I committed to them thinking I'd be all right, and I'm not. So, you know, nobody's exempted it.
You're personally feeling the pressure?
Yeah, big time.
If you wanted to get one message across to people, what would you want them to understand?
There's nothing left for those at the bottom right now. So my message is simple. If you've got any heart, if you've got any brain, if you've got any compassion, if you've got any humanity in you, these are the people who need to be attended to. You know, you may be worse off, but you're nothing like as worse off as the people who are on these levels of benefits right now. And these people's lives will be ruined. So we can't do that. It's just inhumane.
He was explaining to us that nurses are getting referrals to here so they can have enough food to feed themselves or their family. And so these people having to deal with the stress of a very difficult job in a harsh environment, and yet they've been so crushed by this irresponsible government financial spending that they are now having to go to food banks. It's been kind of a strange week coming back here. This is where I grew up, and this is where I used to come every week with my mum. We used to go and do our big weekly shop, and I can't help but reflect on this after what we heard about food banks being used by nurses. My mum was a nurse. We used to come here every week and do the shop. She had a budget. The budget was fixed. She had to get a whole week's shop within that budget. And once she hit the budget, she couldn't get anything else. There was no credit card. There was no taking loans or going to an overdraft. My dad worked hard and my mum worked hard, and they played by the rules. And we got to live a, pretty standard living, But now what you're seeing is teachers and nurses who also are playing by the rules. These are people who just want to do a job. They want to teach kids, they want to help people, like my mum. And I'm now trying to imagine if my mum couldn't afford to even get her weekly shop from within her budget. She would have to go and queue at a food bank. And that's really starting to bother me, especially this part with the massive increase in rents and the massive increase in owning a home. It's putting home ownership out of the reach of normal people. And it's all because of this era of cheap credit, easy money, that's allowed other people to go and scoop up these houses and take control of these, essentially scarce assets. I'm annoyed by all of it. I'm annoyed by the people who've allowed this to happen, the weak people who've made the decisions that benefit a few that cost everyone else. We are heading to go and see my friend Dominic Frisby, who is a comedian, author, and all-round good egg. And going to go and talk to him about inflation, government policy. He's a really good guy to talk to. Hi, mate. You're looking sharp. How you doing?
Very good, thanks. Nice to see you.
What we're seeing now is an impact on the middle class. And some people might be like, why focus on them? They just have to miss out on a frappuccino a couple of times a week. But there's a real reason to care about the erosion of the middle class as well.
If you don't have a middle class, you don't have a society. And in 1950, to lead an ordinary middle class lifestyle in the US or in Europe required one salary. Now, to enjoy the same middle class lifestyle requires 2 salaries and a shed load more debt and probably fewer kids as well. People talk about why is population growth not what it was. The number one reason why people don't have more kids is expense. If you look at the people who have the most kids in society, it's either the very rich or the very poor.
Why is it a subject you keep coming back to?
Because it is the great fraud at the heart of our society. And once you understand the money system, you can understand the extent to which people have been ripped off. Lenin said it's the best way to destroy a society, to destroy the middle class. And if you look at the original definition of inflation, the definition would be something along the lines of the increase of the money supply with the consequent of higher prices. Now, it just means higher prices. In its measures of inflation, the government is only measuring the prices of certain goods where the price is likely to fall over time. And the government is able to say, look, inflation's only 3%, but in reality, credit growth, money supply growth has been much, much higher. But it's been concealed by these bogus measures. I've got a piece of paper here, and what this table shows is the cost of certain goods in 1970 versus the cost of those goods now. So we're going to start with the average salary. In 1970, the average salary in the UK, £1,456. Today, it's nearly £26,000. So it's gone up 18 times. Pretty good. There's no fixed supply of labour. We can outsource a lot of labour to the third world. We import a lot of cheap immigrant labour. Also, more women working in the workforce. So the labour supply has grown. Now look at the average house. £4 grand in 1970. 278 grand today. It's gone up nearly 70 times, 69 times. If the average salary had gone up 69 times, the average salary would now be 100 grand. We're going to look at a car now. We've got Ford Cortina.
Remember them?
Yeah, great cars.
Great car.
882 quid in 1970. Today, a Ford Mondeo, the equivalent, costs just shy of 30 quid. So a Ford Cortina's gone up 30 times. But even so, we've got better at making cars, so their price should have fallen. Then you think, actually, most people use finance to buy cars. So even though there's no finite supply of cars, because we use debt, that's why car prices are up 30 times. Most new money goes either into real estate or it goes into financial assets. I think it's only about 10% of newly created money goes into the goods that are measured by CPI.
It's not a thing that's isolated to one party. In the UK, whether it's Labour or Conservatives, they've both been responsible for inflation.
It's not so much the politicians are guilty, it's the fiat money system. Politicians almost invariably take the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is not to put interest rates up, it's not to change the money system, it's to keep interest rates low, allow money creation, and everyone's happy when their asset prices are rising. Around about 1900, across the West and in North America, roughly a tenth of everything you earn was taken from you in taxes. Today, it's, by the time you factor in inflation, it's more than 50%. And even with all this inflation, even with all the taxes we pay, they are still running extraordinary deficits and debt levels keep on growing. And the more debt there is, the cost of all that will just be passed on to our children, but it is also passed on to the general public through inflation. One of the ways they pay off their debt is by debasing their money. It's all become really apparent because of one, COVID, and two, the war in Ukraine messing up supply chains.
Do you not think that's just giving them excuses?
It's given them an excuse. Every time I watch a clip of Biden, he's blaming American inflation on Putin. It's 50 years of unrestrained money supply growth. Thatcher used to say you can't have freedom until you have economic freedom. And at the moment, the relationship we enjoy with government is no different to that which serfs enjoyed with their lords. But ultimately, it will continue until money is sound again. One of the beautiful things about Bitcoin is that it has proved the most fantastic educational tool. Even if Bitcoin fails, it has told the fiat money story brilliantly, and it's pulled back so many curtains and revealed so many truths.
Frankie,
hi. Peter.
How
nice
are you?
To see you. Good, you?
Good. Hey, those pieces went down well.
I'm glad.
So, as you know, we've been making a film this week about inflation. We're trying to understand the impact on people, and I think you might have some lessons that other people can learn from as we get into difficult times. I do want to ask you again about what happened in 2008.
I've been brought up in restaurants, and when I say brought up in restaurants, I mean my whole life. My parents have owned restaurants. I literally begged my dad for a job, and the one thing he said to me was, I'm not giving you a job because the minute you get in, you'll never get out. I loved seeing my dad talk to people, the regulars, I used to know them by name. It was just a really, really great time. And 2008, I remember thinking, okay, this is a bit bad, but I never thought they're just gonna send us a letter and take everything away. We stripped the place bare, obviously sold what we could, the rest we left there. And then, obviously, when everything happened, we found ourselves just in the shit, really, with nothing left.
What was the impact on the family?
Huge. Pretty big. My dad, he spiraled just like anyone would when you lose everything that you've worked your whole life for. It was just really hard, and I don't feel personally responsible, but I feel like I definitely could have done more. We could have saved it. We could have done takeaway. We could have started doing deliveries. The list is endless, but hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
And how was Dad during that period?
He tried the food truck route, got a pitch. That didn't work. And then I think they decided pizza, Italian food is what they know. And they decided to open, obviously, Harrowden Road. And my dad did that, hoping to make £200 a week. They did it with no advertising, very little money. And it took him 3 months to figure out the way he wanted to do it. And here we are.
With this place, it's obviously been a huge success.
Yeah.
Everyone knows and loves it.
Thank God.
Your trays are famous.
Yeah.
How have you protected yourself for future adverse economic conditions? Because we are in a difficult period right now, and for some people who maybe are running their first business are not aware of how difficult it can get or what you can go through. How have you prepared this?
So we've tried to keep our overheads obviously as small as we can. The rent is manageable. We've got nicer landlords now, and we think twice about buying things because you just have to.
Is there any part of you that is worried about how things might get?
I am worried, but thankfully we are busy, and knowing what we know now, there are a million things that we can do to make sure that we keep these doors open, and we will do absolutely everything. I may not have done it when I was 18, but I'll definitely do it now.
How do you feel about when you work hard, you play by the rules? There are people out there in other parts of the economy that don't, and the things they do can directly affect you.
It's annoying because it's all about choices, and it's all about the respect that people have for each other, and clearly some people that do make the rules don't have any respect for anyone else and only care about themselves. I would rather focus my energy on things that I can physically change, because I can't change what they're doing, and I can't make them put the fuel down. I can't make them sort the war out so that the flour would maybe go down just a little bit.
Got your dad there in the background.
Oh.
It's okay. Hey, how you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Right, can we get some coffee?
Yes, of course. I need one. Absolutely.
I wanted to end this film on a positive note, but I can't. Since I made this film, the economic crisis has worsened. Energy prices have exploded, and the government response was to borrow more money. Following this, they then introduced a raft of tax cuts, causing the pound to collapse. The Bank of England responded by raising interest rates to protect the pound, increasing the financial pressure on homeowners. We are in the midst of an economic tug-of-war, and the system is breaking, and it is the hard-working families suffering the most. Those who are invisible to the politicians who created this crisis. It is a mess, and there are no short-term solutions. We must wean ourselves off cheap credit, and we must fix the money.